I mean, life is so full of surprises, and the saving of the house was a huge surprise, and everything else is too. Everything is so surprising. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how I was wondering how to end Naomi's Road. And so I thought, you know, in real life, Naomi, in the novel Obasan, not in real life, in the novel Obasan, Naomi's mother dies, and that's really heavy. So I didn't want that in the book. So I remembered when I was a child, there was this little girl, this very spoiled little girl, who lived a little bit away, and her name was Mitzi. And I thought, okay, Mitzi, maybe they can be friends. Maybe they can even be best friends. Maybe they can be blood sisters. That's the way I'll solve that. And I don't know where that idea came from, but I wrote it. And I thought, okay, that's it. And then, I think it was either the next day or the next couple of days, I got a letter from the real-life Mitzi that I had not been in touch with since I left Slocan as a child. So then I thought, well, yeah, that's what happens. That's the kind of thing that happened in the writing of Obasan, when I would be in the archives and there would be a question and I'd have no answer to it. And I'd go downstairs and I'd sit down and have chocolate or hot chocolate. And sitting beside me would be this person. What is her name? Her name is Roy, Pat Roy. I didn't know her, I'd never met her. I didn't know why she was there, she didn't know why I was there. And I said, I've just been reading these letters, and there's this thing by this woman called Muriel Kogawa, and she's saying, God damn his soul, about this person. Who was this person? And that's what I'm thinking about. And she said, I'm working on that. And she gave me all the answers. So then I knew I was on the right track. And it's like that moment when Mitzi's letter came. So for half a year after that, I was happy. Because life is so filled with these wonderful surprises. And so I never thought I was a children's writer. In fact, I don't think I'm a children's writer. Maggie is, in that I've just finished reading her 2 books, Chance and the Butterfly and Somebody's Girl. Have you read those? Who's read those? Everybody should read those. I've been telling everybody they should read them. I mean, because children who are just cut off from the real world and can see the incredible magic of a butterfly and can love it and know it. Because to know is to love. Then you love the planet. Then you solve the problems of the planet because you love it, because you love the little insect. You love it, as this little boy Chance did. And when I was reading Somebody's Girl, there was a certain point in that book in which I sobbed and I cried. So I became a Maggie Devries fan. And I thought, I've got so much to learn from her. And I do, because she knows what it is to be a child, to feel like a child today. And that's what you have to be a children's writer, is to know that and to be able to give that forth, which she does. So the way Naomi's Road came into being, first of all, was as an idea of somebody at Oxford University Press who said to me, could you write a little picture book, basically? There'll be all these pictures and you just have to write the captions. So I thought, oh, I can do that. you've given me the picture and I'll write the caption. But they didn't have the picture, so I started to write, and it got written so quickly. So that the first version of Naomi's Tree is a very simplified little book, and I don't think it's out there anymore. But some people think it's better than this one. And maybe it is. They say it's more, what's the word, pithy. It's very short. I wish it were still around, but anyway, in my evil way, I rewrote it, and I think I should not rewrite anymore. So in a way, I think this Naomi's Road maybe isn't as good as the other one, but people say it's a fine, so it's out there. And so that's why I don't think I'm a children's writer, because it didn't sort of come from within me to do it. It's something that came from somebody else. And when that's the process, I'm not sure about the result, and so I have my doubts about that. And that's one of the reasons it got rewritten, is because of these doubts, because I'm a person of too much doubt. So these days, my practice is not to know things beforehand, and it's to proceed with trust, and that's the way I am right now. How many more minutes do we have? Can you tell me how many minutes I have? 10. Okay. Tell me when I'm done. As I say, all right, big social issues, and how do we write about them? Well, it happens to be that I'm writing something called Gently to Nagasaki. The big social issue that's in the world, I think, is climate change. I think that it's so huge we don't know how to deal with it. And it's so unthinkably huge. The scientists are saying, by and large, a lot of them anyway, we've had it. If we don't yesterday deal with the problems, we're going to get to the tipping point. We're going to be over. How do you deal with that? I think your mind blanks out. You think, okay, every day is every day. If I keep on living every day as if it's every day, it'll be every day. So I don't think about it. And so nothing gets done. And so the government doesn't deal with it. And scientists are sort of saying something. Activists are saying something. There seems to be not much connect. There is in some ways, but in some ways not. And we're mystified. And so I've been wondering how to write about that. But anyway, I'm writing Gently to Nagasaki, and what is that? For 10 years, it was a title without a book. And it's never been that way. It's always been the other way around. There'd be a book and no title till the end of it. But this was a title that would not go away. So now I'm finally, after 10 years of not being able to write it, because there were these two lumps of hay. One said speak, and the other said don't speak. So I was the donkey in the middle, and I chose the don't speak for 10 years because I thought that was right. But the urgency was so powerful that I went into the speaking without knowing where it was going, what it's doing, or anything. And that, in fact, is the way I generally proceed, without knowing ahead of time. And by finding out, by acting, by moving, by writing what it was that was supposed to be done. And so as I come towards the end of this book, and this book has been about something that I found out after writing Obasan, much after. I mean, Obasan was one of those books, too, that got written, and then there was this mystery all the way through it. There was no answer to the mystery. I was finished in, but there was no answer. The mystery was what happened to the mother. I didn't know. And so then I was told that I had to know. And so that's how Nagasaki arrived, as a thought at the end. So Nagasaki is at the beginning and at the end of Obasan, and Nagasaki is at the heart of this book. But what it is that the event means to me is that the enemy is the best friend. Now, I think my time is my time up? So I can't tell you about that. But I can maybe in question and answer time.
Thank you. Wow. I feel very moved by everything that's been said and by being here in this place with all of you. I wrote what I'm going to say to you tonight. I don't normally write down every word I'm going to say, but I felt that for this I needed to do that. So I'm going to share my thoughts that I've written, and I'm going to read 2 passages to you as well. First of all, though, I'd like to thank the Vancouver Children's Literature Roundtable and the Museum of Anthropology for bringing us together here. I have titled my short talk, Hope in Dark Places. I'm going to speak about the place hope finds in 2 of my books, Hunger Journeys, a novel set in the last winter of the Second World War, and Rabbit Ears, a novel in progress about 2 teenage sisters right here in Vancouver in 1998. On July 15th, 1944, 3 weeks before her family was arrested by the Nazis, Anne Frank wrote in her diary, "It's a wonder I haven't abandoned all my ideals. They seem so absurd and impractical. Yet I cling to them because I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart." When I was 12 years old, this is me now again. When I was 12 years old or so, I clung to Anne's words. They still move me today. Did Anne abandon these ideals later on? We do not know. But here she is expressing her opinion, an opinion she clings to, she needs, in spite of, or more likely because of everything. And I think that most children need that, a hopeful way to see the world they are growing into, a way that is not jaded or anarchic or nihilistic. That's why I grasped those words right along with Anne and have never let go. Because if she in her circumstances could believe them, maybe I can too. I was born in Guelph, Ontario in 1961, long after the Second World War was over and far, far away from the ground on which the war was fought. Yet all my life I have heard stories. My father grew up in the Netherlands. In May 1940, when Germany invaded, he had just turned 9. In April 1945, when he rode his wooden-wheeled bicycle into Leeuwarden to greet the liberating Canadian forces, he was not quite 13. In 1940, he saw the German soldiers arrive by parachute. Battles were raged right outside his house as the country was being occupied. Twice his family was evicted from their home so that the occupying forces could live in it. His street had a barbed wire fence right down the middle, German forces on one side, Dutch citizens on the other. The German cook would put leftover porridge out on the step for Dad to take home to his hungry family. But when the Nazis vacated his house, they left destruction behind them. They defecated on the floor. When Dad witnessed the liberation, he saw and felt great joy, but then was horrified to see young Dutch women who had been labeled collaborators by their neighbors march down the street, stripped and shorn, as part of the liberation parade. My father did not tell me that last story until I asked him questions when I was researching for Hunger Journeys. My mother-in-law, Lynn, told me exactly the same story about her experience of the liberation, although she was in Almelo, not Leeuwarden. If I hadn't married a man with Dutch parents, I don't know if I would ever have written about the war. My father's stories felt too close, claustrophobic almost, because I sprang from them, yet they were not mine. I had not lived them. But I was able to step back and see the stories Lynn, my mother-in-law, told. I was astonished by them. She was shot at by Allied planes while hiding out on a cross-country train journey. On that same journey, she was protected by a young German soldier who fell in love with her. Later, she was forced to take part in the illegal slaughter of a cow and had to help with the disemboweling, only to discover that the dead cow was pregnant. Later, as I immersed myself in my research, her stories began to seem ordinary when held up against the full sweep of that war. In a way, it was the most ordinary detail of all that drove me to write. Lynn told me that her father stole the food that her sister had brought back from long, dangerous journeys to the countryside. Lynn saw him slip into the kitchen at night and eat the food that was meant for his children. I don't think that she ever forgave him. When I heard that, I began to imagine a real family peopled by human beings, not the heroic, self-sacrificing parents one hears about, but parents who would act selfishly, who would fail their children. That story of the stolen food led me to reflect on all the stories that Lynn had told me, my father's stories too, and how topsy-turvy many of them were. She was shot at by Allied planes, assisted by a young German soldier, disgusted by the way the Dutch treated some of their own young women after liberation. I began to want to write, and I think that the topsy-turviness points straight at hope in a way, and that's what attracts me. I think that for me, the hope is in the gray areas. I think the hope is in the small personal triumphs. I want to show all of that while leaving the gray, gray. The gray is not shadow. If you shine a light on it, it does not vanish. If you shine a light on it, you can see the blend. You can see the darkness, and you can see the light entwined, as they are in all of us. I was afraid to write about that gray, especially when it was in a world so far removed from my own and in a war which made evil manifest. But I do believe that if we are to have hope, and if we are to teach hope to young people, we must be willing to look at things as they really are, as best we can. 10 days ago, I spent the afternoon here in the museum. I spent an hour or so in the memory exhibit over there, which you should visit if you have a chance, reflecting on pasts erased and pasts brought to light after long darkness, on pasts that shift depending on who remembers them and on when. Then I stepped into this room, and I didn't realize until I got here today that this would be where we would be speaking. I thought we were going to be speaking in the theater over there, but we're not, we're here. Then I stepped into this room and was brought to a halt. The photographs are beautiful, enormous, clean and clear, plain and bright, delicate and strong. If you have not looked at them, which I now know that you are looking at them, I hope that you will do so. Their meaning, their source defies comprehension. On the wall, I read the artist's words, and you can actually read them right while I read them to you. Gently pressing out the creases on a blouse long folded up, I bring it into the light of the sun, shining through a window. For an instant, the polka dots and floral patterns shimmer, and the woman who once wore it rises. That is a kind of celebration of life that once was, and somehow in that I feel a kind of hope as well, though we tend to think of hope as looking forward, not back. When we write for children about war, we are usually drawing their attention back to the past. We are asking them to look at the wrongs that we humans have done, but we also show them the kindnesses, the complexity, the good hearts. Perhaps if we can show enough detail in the shadings of light and darkness, we can help them to gain a sense of who we humans really are. And I would like to think that there is some shimmer to that, to us. 2 weeks ago, in a creative writing class I teach, we were discussing the very subject before us this evening, hope. My students had read My Name is Sipitza by Shirley Sterling, a fictionalized account of the author's experience at residential school, and Joy's Naomi's Road, actually The pages that I include in their course pack are from the earlier version of Naomi's Road, which is the version that I've read many, many, many times. I find every word to be pure poetry. So we read those two pieces. At a certain point in the conversation, one of my students quoted Fred Rogers, the Mr. Rogers of television fame. Mr. Rogers was asked how to help children cope with painful events in their lives or hardships witnessed in the world or on television. And some of you may have heard this, but I never had heard this before. His response was, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look, see, this makes me cry. My mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. I am deeply moved by that, as you can see. It seems so honest, but hopeful at the same time, not hiding the darkness in the world, but showing the light that balances it. I think another part for us adults with children in our lives is to be the helpers and to show children how they can be helpers too. That's life, though, not fiction. I am always telling my students, that in children's books, the child protagonist must solve his or her own problems. The helpers must be whisked out of the way. That's why there are so many car accidents in children's books. Leaving the children free to save the day. Now, with Mr. Rogers' words resonating in my mind, I am looking again to see if I have missed something. While protagonists really must solve their own problems, the helpers are there. Obvious ones, the ones that come to my mind first, are Gandalf and Dumbledore. Note, though, that they are there at the beginning, not at the end. They provide support up to a certain point. Gandalf is absent when Sam and Frodo enter Mordor. Frodo has Sam, but they are peers. And a final helper shows up in the surprising form of a desperate Gollum in the very last second. What about helpers in my book, in Hunger Journeys? I certainly did not think about helpers when I was writing the book. I stripped Lena of support pretty much right from the start. And I gave her some tough problems to solve. But the Dutch resistance plays an important part in the story, and a young German soldier helps Lena, though it is a complex form of helping. And she forms friendships and ultimately gathers enough strength herself to offer support of varying types to others. I'd like to read a passage from the book to you now. This takes place early in the story when Lena and her brother Pete are out gathering wood, which is illegal, but obviously necessary since it's the only way they have of heating their homes. Am I okay for time? Okay. As October passed, Lena seemed to see less and less of her brother. More and more, it was Sophie she wanted to spend time with, not Pete. One morning, Pete seemed distracted when they were gathering wood together. Lena was the lookout. He was removing a wooden tie from between the tram tracks. The trams couldn't run anymore anyway, so the ties had recently become fair game, though you didn't want to be seen taking them. He dragged the tie to where she stood and dropped it. 29 men were shot yesterday, he said, in retaliation. His voice dropped to a whisper. I saw the bodies. Lena turned away. She reached down and hoisted the piece of wood. Let's go home, she said. Don't you care? He said, his voice too loud now. Lena stopped. Hush, she said. You can't just talk about these things in public. It's dangerous. Pete stepped up to her and talked into her face, his voice quiet but fierce, his breath stinking, as everyone's did, from hunger and bad food. Dangerous? You think talking's dangerous? What about all the work the Dutch resistance is doing for us? He glared at her and repeated himself, for us, I saw the bodies. They laid them out all in a row by the side of the street because one German officer was killed, 29 in retaliation for one. And they burned a building too. They don't even care if their victims are in the resistance. They can be anybody. Stop it, Pete, stop it. She didn't want to know. She really didn't. You could help, you know. No, she said, I couldn't. Why not? Why are you so afraid? He paused. And you actually called that girl your friend for years. If they hauled Sophie off, would you turn your back on her too? They're not going to. No, they're not, because she's not Jewish. But remember the girl you never speak of? Remember the girl you wouldn't visit? She's probably dead right now, just like the men by the road, and you don't even care. Lena barely heard his last words because she was running by then, leaving the wood for him to lug home somehow. She did care, she did. But Pete needed to shut his mouth. She didn't want to know about dead bodies at the side of the road, and she didn't want to think about. I'll stop that passage there. But now I'm just going to leave that book there and move on to the other book that I told you that I would talk a little bit about today. I'm going to take a sip of my water first. I have written a book for adults as well that explores a dark subject in which social conflict figures prominently, Missing Sarah, a memoir of loss. My sister Sarah is one of Vancouver's missing women, one of the 20 for whose murders Robert Pickton stood accused but was not tried. She was a writer herself, and I wove her writing into my book, doing my best to tell her story and mine as they intertwined. In March 2009, almost 6 years after Missing Sarah was published, I learned that my sister was sexually abused as a child. For 4 or 5 years, beginning, we believe, when she was 8 years old, without a single one of us knowing, she went to a house several blocks away where first the man groomed her, as they call it, then he abused her, and finally, when she reached puberty, he rejected her. Not long after that, she started running away from home, selling sex and using heroin. The year she turned 17, that man committed suicide. I don't know if she ever knew that, or what, if anything at all, it would have meant to her if she had. Since I learned of the abuse, I have been trying to understand how it could be. I have been trying to understand her silence. I have been trying to understand the need that drove her to that man's house over and over again for years, despite the fact that he was wounding her every single time. I have been pondering the nature of those wounds, how they prepared her for what followed when she was downtown. I have been thinking about the fact that the men who paid her for sex, all of them, those who paid her when she was 14 and those who paid her when she was 27, were benefiting from what that man did to her. In a sense, that man's abuse made it possible years later for another man to murder my sister. Now I'm working on a novel for teens about all of that. Its working title is Rabbit Ears, and it is about 2 sisters 2 years apart, Beth and Geraldine. Geraldine has a secret, and her life is unraveling. She runs away downtown, where she slips into sex work and starts using drugs. She meets a woman named Sarah, who tries to help her. Sarah, in the book, actually is my sister. Geraldine is based on Sarah, but I decided to have her meet the real Sarah in the story. You can do anything you want when you write novels. And I am very much enjoying seeing Sarah live again on the computer screen, a little bit like the woman referred to here, whose dress shimmers as she rises. It is taking me a long time to write this book, but I feel compelled. And when I was preparing to come here today, I started thinking about the topic with reference to that book, how to write about social conflict for young people, or, as I have recast it, hope in dark places. If we look close in our own city, our deepest conflict, our greatest darkness may be the poverty, homelessness, and addiction in our own streets, and our abandonment of, or helplessness in the face of, some of our most vulnerable citizens. And if we look closer still, for many of our youth, their deepest conflict is inside their own hearts, their own souls, as they hold their suffering inside, trusting no one, whether they are being bullied, abused, struggling with addiction. The list is long. Maybe what I'm trying to do in writing Rabbit Ears is point out the helpers right in our own lives, the ears ready to listen, the arms ready to embrace. And I'm trying to show the high price of silence. I'm trying to explore the ways in which we adults might be encouraging silence in those we love, in those who need us most. In pointing out the helpers, we can point first and foremost to ourselves. Here I am, we can say in so many ways. I'm ready, I'm willing, I want to hear. When I say you can tell me anything, I mean it, even if it seems that telling, that breathing a word, letting a syllable hang in the air will tear the world asunder. Sarah wrote once when she was still a teenager that she felt she provided a service by taking men's rough treatment onto herself, because she was saving other girls and women from rape and violence. Well, that man taught her to think that way, and we failed to save her. She tried to help others, but she would not let herself be helped. In my book, Geraldine does not die. With others' help, she speaks. The silence is broken, the secret is out, healing can occur. I think that I'm trying to follow Mr. Rogers' instructions. I am trying to point out the helpers and to help teens learn how to find the helper in themselves without sacrificing themselves in the process. I would like to finish by reading a short passage from Rabbit Ears, which is, as you understand, in progress. Geraldine has just run away downtown for the third or fourth time. She seeks out Sarah, whom she calls Blackie, because she has a sense that Sarah may be able to help her. Sarah leads her off on a walk through the downtown east side. And one more thing I must tell you before I read is that this part of the story, Geraldine's parts of the story, are written in second person, which is an experiment. So the you of this passage is Geraldine. She took you over a viaduct eventually, a bridge over a railway that circled around and led right into a great big park on the water. Streetlights lit a path through the park. Huge cranes towered in the harbor. Even in the dark, the slight drizzle, the water sparkled on your right. Downtown showed, all lit up, straight ahead. This is Crab Park, or Portside Park, right down at the foot of Main Street. Sarah led you to the swings in the playground. No streetlights there, so the playground equipment, dimly lit, felt lonely, abandoned. You hesitated. How old did she think you were? But she plunked herself down on the middle swing. Here, she said, kicking a leg up toward you. Pull. These things are killing me. You stared and then obeyed, pulling first one long, shiny boot from a leg, then the other, and dropping them on the grass beside her purse. She pumped then, her legs strong, her body reaching for the sky. Come on, she shouted. It's amazing. And you did, though you seated yourself gingerly, shaking the small puddle off the strip of rubber, wincing as the left-behind damp seeped through your jeans. Then you pushed off, leaned back, straightened your legs, and forgot the wet underneath you as you aimed your face at the dark wet above. The two of you looked at each other when you were both as high as you could go, flying, and you laughed loud together. Your chest expanded with joy. Then she started to slow herself down. Soon the two of you were weaving back and forth, scuffing your feet in the damp sand. Why are you here, she asked, her gaze intent on the ground. I can't be at home, you said, not pausing, just saying. Why not? It's horrible there, you said, and your mind flashed to Mom's hand in your hair, to Sibylla's big furry body. She looked at you then, and you felt her see right inside you, and you felt yourself shrink under her gaze. Does someone hurt you? Yes, you said, too fast. Then you faltered. Well, not now. Not now, she echoed, and added after a moment, this is not a good place to be. You waited. She was silent for a long, long time. Then she said, somebody hurt me too when I was little, and I never told. It didn't happen at home, though. I should have stayed. I really, really should have stayed. I should have told. I can't, you said. It sounded small and wrong, but it felt big and right. I don't believe you, she said. Then look at the cats. They were coming up from the beach, 3, no 4, no 5 cats, heading across the grass in the dark. They were silent, stealthy like ghosts. Fear flickered down your arms. Sarah laughed. Here, kitties, she called. Here, kitties. You grunted and started pumping, driving yourself up into the air out of their reach. Sarah laughed some more. "They're not going to hurt you, kid," she said. "They're hungry, that's all. People feed them sometimes." You pumped harder, not believing a word of it, imagining claws scratching, hating the dark, the isolation all of a sudden. The cats circled around, not coming close enough to touch. One of them meowed, big and demanding. You pumped harder while Sarah's laughs quieted. "We've got nothing for you, cats," she said. "On your way now, so my scaredy friend can come down." They obeyed, wandering away across the park. You slowed your pumping and came to a stop at last. Sarah was pulling her boots back on. "Let's go," she said. "I'm putting you on a bus." She led the way back to the path and stopped in front of a big stone surrounded by bushes, lit by a tall lamp opposite. First, you noticed the candles and the flowers gathered in the wet dirt in front. Then your gaze traveled upward to the words engraved in the stone. And this is a real stone, and these are the words on the stone. "The heart has its own memory. In honor of the spirit of the people murdered in the downtown East Side, many were women and many were Native Aboriginal women. Many of these cases remain unsolved. All my relations." Dedicated July 29th, 1997. You read the words twice. A third time, anger fluttered inside you, along with fear and confusion. "Why are you showing me this?" you asked. Sarah shrugged, gestured toward the words again. You read them one more time. At last she spoke. "Those women, they could be you, they could be me." She dug around in her tiny purse, pulled out a lighter, leaned down and lit one of the candles, positioning it under a plastic flower protected from the damp sky. Then she turned and led the way up the path onto the viaduct. She didn't say much on the way back to Princess, and neither did you. Thank you.
The question is for Joy and Maggie both. Is there anything in the subject of war that you feel is beyond the line that you could possibly address for children, for teenagers, when you know you can write about the experience of war wherever that takes place, or the experience of conflict wherever that takes place, that you could write for adults? What is there that stops you? What area stops you? Is there anything that is different in how you write for kids beyond the helpers?
I don't, is this? Yes. It is. I don't think for me, I think I probably would write the same, whether I would write in it through a slightly different lens, but the boundaries would probably be similar for me because my own sensibilities would stop me short of being able to write about some things because of who I am. I think that's my answer. So I think that offhand, I can't think of anything that one couldn't possibly write about for children. If you read books like Once by Morris Gleitzman, or there are brilliant books that handle the most terrible things, but through metaphor, through different strategies. I do feel that there does need to be, the hope does seem to need to be a necessary element, but then I really want hope in everything that I read. So that's why I say I think I write the same either way.
I've gone blank.
This is on?
Yep. So, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. When I don't know what's required in a work, I just wait. and I trust, and that's my practice. And I think that war is one of those huge, huge topics. Sort of like outer space, it's so huge. But I think that it's connected to the tiniest thought, the tiniest wish, the tiniest insect, and it's all so connected. And somehow the way to peace is in knowing the connections, even as a child. So I can remember as a child, at the age of 7, when I was in Spokane, praying every night to know the truth. And one of the things that I thought about was that there was a child somewhere, either out in a battlefield or on the edge of a cliff, and that child was in utter terror. So what I sought was a way to end the suffering. And so what I'm trying to do right now is to find the place of peace, which I think, coming towards the end of this book, I've got a new bit of light on. And I think that would apply to a child. And I think what I would want to be able to do, although I don't know how to do it, is to be able to translate what I've experienced recently in such a way that it could be apprehended and held and believed by somebody else. I don't know how to do that. So I just wait, and it could be anything that makes it so. Whatever is deeply true within any of us, I think, connects with whatever is deeply true in the other. And that, we are all children, after all. And so that can be said, whatever is true for us can be said to a child, I think, no matter how horrible it is, because that's what's real. And I think the child does need to be protected, but so do we all. And so what will help us in that protection, I think, is, as you say, the helper. Who is and what is the helper? And I am so grateful in my life to have been informed that the helper is everywhere, and to trust that, and to entrust myself to that, and to believe that whatever is required and whatever is necessary will arrive as we proceed.